Yesterday marked a month since the killing of 37-year-old Renee Good by an immigration agent. And in Minneapolis, the protests that followed her death have not let up, continuing to reverberate throughout the city and beyond. The Hennepin County Sheriff's Office says more than 40 people were arrested outside the Whipple Federal Building in St. Paul yesterday after demonstrators remained past an order to disperse. While hundreds gathered at a memorial service yesterday in honor of two slain Minnesota residents, Renee Good and Alex Preddy. Becca Good, the widow of Renee Good, released a statement along with a new photo of Renee, saying in part, "Minneapolis has shown me that even in the middle of grief and fear, people still show up for each other." And that is what we've heard again and again from Minnesota. From memorials to arrests, it's not just grief, but a warning. This could happen anywhere. That message is landing because across the country right now, governors and mayors are not just expressing concern, they're acting. In Virginia, Governor Abigail Spanberger signed an executive order to end state agency partnerships with ICE, cutting off cooperation with two groups. In Oregon, Governor Tina Kotek, joined by 31 mayors, formally called on ICE to end operations in their communities, a direct rebuke to federal involvement that's already been underway. In Boston, Mayor Michelle Wu issued an executive order barring ICE from using city property for immigration enforcement. And in Chicago, Mayor Brandon Johnson went even further, signing an executive order that requires local police to document alleged abuses by federal immigration agents for potential felony prosecution. What we are watching now is a growing coordinated response by state and local officials, saying loud and clear, we are not going to pretend this is normal. Joining us now is Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson to talk all about this. Mayor Johnson, I actually want to pose a question for you that my Uber driver asked me this week, which is, can residents trust the police to protect them against ICE if ICE has decided that they are the target or somehow implicated in an operation enforcement? And how exactly does that look? I mean, this is a really strange dynamic we're living in. We've seen videos where people are getting pulled over by ICE and they're screaming, call 911, call 911. It's really startling to hear people calling the police against other law enforcement entities. I mean, what is the guidance you are giving to your citizens and residents of Chicago?
Well, good morning. 40 years ago, the first black mayor in the history of Chicago, Mayor Harold Washington, moved forward on what essentially is, we call it the Welcoming City Ordinance, or the Sanctuary City, where it prevented local law enforcement from coordinating with federal agents to enforce immigration policy, because what he knew 40 years ago, the trust between community and local law enforcement is paramount to building safer communities. And if the community as a whole does not feel confident that the local law enforcement would indeed serve and protect the interests of all residents, that is antithetical to driving full safety. And so what I've done, I've carried on that legacy to ensure that whether you are documented or not, you can engage with local law enforcement. As a result of that, we've seen historic decline in violence. We had a 60-year low in terms of homicides, much more work to be done. But absent local law enforcement having confidence with local communities, it really prevents for safe communities to actually exist. And so what I've done is I've given some real clear directions that local law enforcement will not only collect evidence, preserve it, and it ultimately creates a pathway for accountability, because clearly we're not getting that level of accountability from the federal government.
Mr. Mayor, the Cook County State's Attorney's Office has pushed back against your ICE executive order. And this is from the Chicago Tribune yesterday. In a memo sent to employees on Friday, the policy chief for Cook County State's Attorney Eileen O'Neill Burke said the city's ICE on notice executive order compromises potential prosecutions of federal agents by politicizing the investigations. Do you have a reaction to that?
Well, there's nothing, that I'm doing outside of the frame of my executive authority, which is very simple. My executive order does not dictate or determine what the state's attorney is able to do. What my executive order does, it simply requires our local law enforcement that in the event we have criminal or abusive behavior that is being carried out by federal agents, that information would be documented. We would preserve that information and then pass that evidence along to the state's attorney, where she can decide to move forward with prosecution as she would do with any other case. What I am encouraged by, though, is that she has made it very clear on record that if evidence is presented to her, she would prosecute. Those are her own words. And you're seeing a growing coalition of district attorneys across this country who see Chicago, as a motto. I'm grateful for the district attorney in Philadelphia, Larry Krasner, who is organizing district attorneys as I organize mayors across this country to stand up to protect the residents of our cities. Never in a million years did we ever imagine that local municipalities would have to defend our residents and working people against the hands and the attacks of the federal government.
Mr. Mayor, I'm just wondering, are helicopters still flying overhead, federal agents, helicopters still flying overhead in Chicago? And I ask that question because, as we all remember, a Black Hawk helicopter was used in a raid on an apartment complex. And a report from ProPublica from Wednesday, I'll read the headline: documents reveal lack of evidence supporting raid on Chicago apartment building involving Black Hawk helicopter. It talks about how for months the Trump administration has justified its dramatic midnight raid. Now, new documents confirm in the government's own words that what prompted the raid was more pedestrian, allegations that immigrants were squatting in the complex.
Yeah, Jonathan, thank you for raising that. Look, we've seen these reckless, rogue federal agents bring absolute terror and chaos across this country. There was a father just outside of the city of Chicago who was dropping his children off, was shot and killed by federal agents. They lied about it. A woman was shot 5 times in the city of Chicago. Again, they lied about it. The charges have been dropped. We saw indiscriminate tear gas being released on residents across the city. And then, what you have highlighted was in the middle of the night, we had Black Hawk helicopters, storm essentially an apartment complex on the south side of Chicago where Black families were zip tied, thrown into a vehicle or a truck, long guns that were, placed in the face of residents. Individuals that were ostensibly undocumented were thrown into a separate truck. Donald Trump said that the city of Chicago is going to find out why the Department of Defense was changed to the Department of War. He has literally declared war on American cities. And that's why I've signed multiple executive orders, whether it's ICE-free zones and then including this one, which provides a pathway for accountability and prosecution.
Mr. Mayor, let me get you on one more thing, because a moment ago you mentioned, and correct me if I've gotten the percentages wrong, a 60% reduction in crime. Did I write that down right?
Sorry, I'm sorry. We had a 30% reduction, 60-year low in terms of homicides. Okay. So we had the fewest amount of homicides in 60 years.
Right. And so I bring that up because President Trump just recently tried to take credit for Chicago's reduction in crime, a reduction in crime that has been replicated in other big cities. Is the president right to say that it was his actions in Chicago, trying to bringing federal agents to Chicago, that made Chicago safer?
He is not. I mean, this president continues to, exacerbate, instability across our country. In fact, where ICE and federal agents were present, we actually saw an increase in violence. In other words, the tension and the chaos that federal agents bring to cities in America, it actually is counterproductive. So yes, we saw a 30% reduction in homicides, shootings, shooting victims, all down. In fact, the city of Chicago doubled the amount of the national average in terms of violence reduction because in my role as mayor, it's about showing up for working people. We've revamped the Detectives Bureau to bring closure and accountability in the city of Chicago, 71% clearance rate. So we're solving crime. We're building more affordable homes. I've reopened mental health clinics, expanded mental health care, investing in our young people. Over 31,000 young people had summer jobs, because we know that policing alone is not going to save our communities. What this president could do, if he was serious about driving down violence, he would restore the $800 million that he took out of the budget for violence prevention. He would, ensure that ATF and local law enforcement can work together to get illegal weapons off the streets of Chicago that are being funneled in from states that voted for him. A 30% reduction in the ATF budget alone. We recovered and took over 11,000 guns off the streets of Chicago. This is a problem across America. This president is not serious about protecting working people. And if the federal government is not going to hold him accountable, the city of Chicago and municipalities across this country most certainly will.